A hacking crew quietly backdoored 25,000 WordPress sites, working off a target list 1.5 million names long, and then, I'm not even kidding, left the front door to their entire operation wide open to the internet. Not a login in sight, just a plain directory listing of every tool, every target, and every screw-up they made along the way. So here's how the story escalates, because it's not just hackers hacked a WordPress site, that kind of stuff happens every day. Start with the scale. This was a coordinated campaign, not some spray and pray attack, that had a target list of 1.4 million sites, pulled from a search engine called FOFA, which is basically the Chinese Shodan. You ask it, show me every site running this vulnerable plugin, and it hands you the list. But here's what makes it a campaign and not some kid in a basement. They automated the whole thing. They built a data pipeline, merged list targets, deduped them, subtract everything that was already scanned, and fed the fresh batch into a Python scanner running jobs in parallel. So find a vulnerable site, fire the exploit, drop a test file, confirm it's stuck, swap in a web shell, and then log the win. Just wash, rinse, and repeat 1 million times. And then the part that made me giggly inside is the operators left the whole thing exposed. Their target list, their scanners, their exploit scripts, just wide open sitting on an open directory. And because of that one OPSEC screw up, the researchers now have forensic level views of exactly how this mass exploitation campaign ran from the inside. The teams at Control-Alt-Intel and SOC Radar both published deep dives within a few weeks of each other. Control-Alt-Intel did get to it first, but they both found it. The attack surface here is depressingly familiar. They weaponized 27 known vulnerabilities in a WordPress and Joomla plugin. None of it was 0 days. And only 11 were from 2026. The rest were older. Every single one had a patch. This whole thing runs on the gap between a fix exists and somebody cared enough to apply it. It's the digital equivalent of walking to a parking lot just checking which cars left the doors unlocked, and WordPress running something like 40% of websites. That's a pretty big parking lot. The number one performer was a bug in the Breeze Cache plugin. About 45,000 sites were hit, and 17,000 plus were backdoored. Pretty good efficiency, and this is an optimization plugin to help page caching and loading, and the exploit hinged on using locally stored profile avatars from a system called Gravitars, which is not a standard feature. It has to be enabled, and this allowed for tweaking the remote URL to download the web shell. The number 2 exploit got ignored in every aggregator write-up I looked at, which is the ThemeREX Addons flaw. That was another 3,300 shells right there. And this tool is just for adding nice themes and widgets to your WordPress site, but it had a bug in its file upload validation that allowed for arbitrary file uploads, aka a web shell. And here's my favorite lesson in the whole dataset, the Joomla JCE bug. They fired that over 560,000 times and only got 77 valid hits. So maybe it worked, but there were 0 confirmed compromises in here. Max severity payload, but that one barely landed. The rest is a long tail of the usual suspects: simple file list, wave player, ninja form, WordPress file manager. Same story every time. Known bug, patch available, nobody applied it. Alright, here's where it gets genuinely fun, because this is a catastrophic OPSEC failure for the attackers, and I love a good OPSEC failure. Their working server was just open. It was a plain Python simple HTTP server handing out every file in the directory. No authentication, the kind of thing every hosting tutorial tells you not to do, they did. Researchers didn't have to crack anything here. Control-Alt-Intel found it sitting on Hunt.io's Threat Intel platform, which does run internet honeypots to catch this kind of stuff. Inside was the full toolkit. Their target lists, custom scanners written in-house, their exploit scripts, and 2,000 lines of the operator's own bash history. Basically their jankier internal version of Metasploit. I've run red team engagements where we spent way more effort hiding our infrastructure than these guys did running a campaign against 1.5 million sites. My brother in Christ.
Professionals have standards.
So mechanically, I wanted to quickly explain how these web shells work for anybody who doesn't know. Usually when you think of malware, you think of something that we would typically call a reverse shell. This is malware that when it executes on whatever the target is, it actually calls back to the attacker for them to catch the connection. So the listening system to catch that connection is on the attacker's box. There's a variant to that called a bind shell. Bind shell is another piece of malware, but the listening system's actually on the target. The attacker has to initiate that connection over to the target system to get that shell up. A PHP Web Shell works very similar. This one is an attacker finds some way to plant a PHP shell on that system over here. Once they do, they have full control over everything that PHP has as a function set. A lot of those functions allow it to capture commands, execute them on the system, and then return that data back. So usually they'll come through and they'll be running as some lower privileged user like tripdub's data. They're not running as root, hopefully, if it's been configured right. So what happens here is the attacker comes in, they send a request kind of like this. They're going to say, hey, go load evil.php, and here's the bash command that I want to run with it. So it's literally sitting there in the URL. It could be in the post request, but we're going to use this as the example. When it flows in, when it hits the web server, it's going to hit the PHP process. The PHP process is going to traverse the directory tree to find where evil.php is, and then evil.php is going to look at that command and then run it in bash. And then finally, it's going to return it back to the attacker. So this is kind of like the bind shell, where the system listening for the commands is on the target, but the difference is this is going to be a stateless transaction. You're going to get one request and then one response. The primary implant is a PHP web shell called down.php, and it's wrapped like an ogre. It's got layers. 4 of them, in fact, for obfuscation that are stacked right on top of each other to slide past any signature-based scanners. The shell underneath isn't even custom. Researchers say it appeared to be built on an open source project called Best Shell, which is pretty old. It's about 7 years old. Nothing new, but it's pretty feature rich if you ignore the whole crime thing. And the one clear win for defenders here is SOCRadar published the files, hashes, and their indicators of compromise for easy hunting. Once it's on a site, that shell can do pretty much anything. It can run commands, open reverse shells, manage the database. It can also do defensive fingerprinting for EDRs, web app firewalls, and other goodies like that. Here's the tradecraft detail I loved, and I gotta be clear about this because it's hilarious. On their own server, not the victims, the operators ran a second tool called vshell and renamed the process to a kworker, which is the name of a real Linux kernel thread, so it blends into the process tree. That's the stealth the crews were trying to hide behind. Caught red-handed on their own box. On your side, though, really realistically what you're looking for is that PHP web shell. So what's the money shot here? SOCRadar classifies this as a web shell access brokerage. Basically, they break in at large scale, plant backdoors, and resell the access. Now, there's no sign of actual sales records. That's just the general shape of the campaign. And if it holds, it's pretty much a high-volume, low-margin cybercrime. It's the Dollar General of hacking. And it's automated to the teeth. SOCRadar caught 24 different IPs all pulling the same payload within 1 second of each other. So that's not ransom sites phoning home, that's probably a botnet talking. But the thing that actually annoyed me about the campaign, and Control-Alt-Intel validated 25,195 compromised sites, SOCRadar found more than 5,700 still live shells, is how unremarkable it was. There's no genius, no 0 days, no finesse. It was a scanner and a text file of targets and a pile of unpatched plugins. That's the real headline, not that WordPress got hacked, yeah we know that. It's that an operation this ordinary owned 25,000 sites, and the only reason we're even talking about it is they forgot to close the damn door. So a motivated teenager could run this exact playbook. Quick word on the who behind this exceedingly successful blunderbuss of web pwnage. Both teams lead towards Chinese-speaking crews, but neither is truly certain. There was a lot of simplified Chinese in the documents that they were able to gather. But the real link between campaigns usually isn't common names. It's a shared infrastructure, tooling, strategies, tactics. That's how the pros handle the attribution. If you're running WordPress, and statistically you might be if you've got a website, here's your homework, and actually do it. Run Control-Alt-Intel's free exposure checker. You type in your domain, it stays on here, it gets hashed before it's sent up to them so it doesn't just leak it out. And it tells you if you were on the hit list. Then go look for that down.php and the other web shell files. There's a whole list of IOCs in the articles. They're linked in the description below. And then patches. You could use some stinking patches. And for the love of everything, disable directory listings on your servers. Even the bad guys couldn't be bothered to do that, and it made them look like chumps. Don't go nuke your site. Patching literally wins this one. And if you like watching a crew accidentally dox their own criminal enterprise, do me a favor on your way out. Upload a web shell to the Like Button's WordPress site, then swap all the pages so they load hamster dance. But that's all I got for you guys today. I'll catch you on the flip side. I love you. Peace.